Holocaust. Generally, it is defined as the annihilation of 6 million Jews and the murder of other minority or dissenting groups. However, we endeavor to approach the Holocaust differently.
Rather than focusing on the deaths of Jewish individuals, we decided to celebrate and mourn the death of a civilization, a way of life, which existed in Central and Eastern Europe for hundreds of years before the Holocaust.
Only echoes remain. Countless Jewish communities were eradicated by the Nazis. They no longer exist on maps, only in memory. We wanted to learn about these communities, to pay homage to, and learn from them.
How does one simultaneously celebrate life and mourn loss?
Trompa interviewed 1,200 Jews still living between the Baltic and the Aegean.
The interviewers spent up to 20 hours with each, asking them to paint a picture of the world they grew up in, as well as the world they rebuilt for their families after the war.
Between 2000 and 2007, more than 140 interviewers, historians, scanners, transcribers, and editors worked throughout Eastern Europe.
Nearly all of the interviews were conducted with Jews who were born before 1932 living in Europe. The primary goal was to ask the oldest living Jews to share their stories as they experienced.
Considering all that they had gone through, it was important to us to show a complete picture of Jewish experience in this region. No one has done this before us, no one has done so since.
The interviewers built a relationship with each individual, and so did we, living through their words and uncovering the wealth of their cultures, traditions, the intricacies of family, community, vocation, school stories, and moments in childhood.
We pay tribute to their legacies.
Through research and our own artistic interpretations, we bring these stories to life.
We sought to capture the essence of each individual and pay tribute to their legacies.
Listen to the echoes.
What is a person's essence? A gift they give to the world. Gerda, bright, smiling, vibrant, curious. Second child of Julius and Helen Weissman. Loves flowers, learning, family. Afraid of seeing her family suffer. Wishes for peace, love, compassion. Afraid and a healthy father, Weissman Klein.
Gerda Weissman Klein. Gerda's essence is her family. Her father, before the war, made her promise to not commit suicide. She says, "I was fortunate to have had a happy childhood. Its memory has helped me to survive, and I have used it as a beacon to illuminate the darkness of the tragedy that followed."
Gerda in Bielsko, Poland, 1939.
I love my town. I love my family, but I don't love the times I live in. English is forbidden in Bielsko, but my dream is to learn a different language. I stay up for hours studying the English alphabet, sunlight peeking through my bedroom window. I can see the trees blowing and the snow falling on the gray sidewalk. But things are less beautiful on the other side of the window. I can barely walk down my street because we are less than human. Last night, I placed my English workbook in a grocery bag covered with potatoes just in case a German caught me. As I walk down the street, I can see the mean-looking symbol hanging from every door. It's bad enough that I'm learning English, but it's worse that I'm a Jew learning English. Then, a German policeman walking towards me from the opposite side of the street. "What do you have in that bag?" he barked. "Just potatoes." Panic. The policeman grabbed the bag from my hand and turned it over, the potatoes and English workbook falling on the hot cement. I was crying. The policeman grabbed me and took me to the police station, hoping to get a reward for his findings. He left me with his boss, and then a few seconds of silence. "Go. Run home as fast as you can. Don't look back. Run back to your family. Don't let anyone see you." I ran faster than I ever had before, out of breath and into my house in tears. It wasn't long after this that Gerda's family was sent to live in a ghetto.
We were to leave. Our home was being torn apart, and all I could do was stand by and watch. The only thing to remain was a promise, one single promise, not to take my own life. I cannot articulate the importance that promise had in saving me. I had to dream while I still could. I ran through my beloved garden, feeling the soil between my toes for the last time. As I wove through the endless maze of fruit trees, I felt my worries slipping away. I ran to my favorite spot, the back corner where the little stream was surrounded by sweet-smelling violets. I lay down in the cool, wet grass and took it all in. It was a warm April day, one of the first of the season, and the trees had just begun to flower. After the cold winter, there was nothing better than seeing all the trees stretch their limbs and blossom. In the years to come, I would appreciate the sky's perfect shade of blue. But in that moment, I didn't yet understand the importance of remembering. I closed my eyes and wished with all my might to revert to old times. Yet, when I opened them, I knew nothing had changed. I could feel it in the air. Then, my mother.
Come, Gerda, say goodbye to your garden. We must go to the ghetto now.
I felt a hole forming inside my heart. With each step I took towards the ghetto, that hole grew larger. Today, that hole is still there, although I have learned to not let its emptiness weigh me down. I have learned, above all, that even after cataclysmic events, I was able to laugh again. Of course, I had the resilience of youth on my side. Everyone has a reservoir of untapped strength that comes to the fore at moments of crisis.
And a promise to a father.
That promise that allows me to again laugh like springtime in my garden.
Kilometers away from Gerda's village in Bielsko is Lodz, Poland. Gustavo Bayernquatsch was born in 1908 and worked as a saleswoman in Lodz before the war. Gustavo's father, Abraham Blum. I'm Jewish. I'm not religious, but when it comes to tradition, we follow it strictly thanks to Gustavo's mother. I own a brush factory. Brushes for scrubbing the floor, counted by the dozen and stacked. I would take those brushes to a man who ran a dry goods store. There were no cars. It was in Lodz, on No Weem Chicago Street. His name was Siegel. On Friday, I'd go there and get paid. Next to the store, there's a Jewish confectionery, and I would stop by and buy a piece of biscuit. Rich Jews lived in a different district, while poor Jews lived in Bludi. The norm was 6 children per family, all living in one room. Before the war, there were Jews who'd carry a bag on their backs and call, "Trade, trade, I'm buying old rags, buying old clothes." That's what life was like. And a few years later, Gustavo met a boy. A letter. He played the banjo, a fun boy. So wish Stan? We got engaged, and it wasn't just an oral agreement. You had to write on this piece of paper. It was called a ksiba. There was this man who came. He was deeply religious, and he wrote that I would be his fiancé, that I would spend the rest of my life with him. That was in the 1920s. This fiancé also liked to play pool and sometimes stood me up. His friend, David Bayernquatsch, was a free thinker, but I was used to tradition. David said, "Guccio, why are you sitting here waiting for him? Go to the movies with me." I wasn't so worldly to run around like that. So I told him, no, I can't, because my fiancé is supposed to come. And he said, "You won't marry him." "Why?" "Because he'll be my wife." I took this lightly and said, "What stupid things are you saying?"
Also in Lodz lived Jerzy Pekelny. I don't have a blood relationship to Jerzy, but I connected with him. He is from Poland, and he is sort of like me. He wasn't strictly Jewish, I'm not either, but we both had an important Jewish identity at both our essence.
We don't observe any religious rituals at home. Grandma Pekelny was the only place we had contact with Jewish tradition. We had amazing feasts there with all different kinds of food. Meat and vegetables are my most favorite, especially when my grandma puts a special seasoning on. That was my favorite part of going to Grandpa's house, just listening to beautiful melodies. It made me feel like I had hope.
I knew we were Jews. I felt it was a strange thing to be. During a stay at the Robka Sanatorium, I met a boy. He was older than me. His father was an officer, maybe even the deputy mayor of Warsaw. He once told me if war broke out, we would win, of course, and we would drop Jewish heads on Berlin from planes. Such were the moods at the time.
In neighboring Czechoslovakia, just more than an hour southeast of Prague, lived
Dagmar Lidlova.
Dagmar was an innocent child. She brought light to a dark room through her giddy giggles. Some would call her careless, but she was just a child.
When I was small, we spent a few holidays in Staroslavi near Makova Lake, where we stayed in a hotel. Each year we would spend 2 to 3 weeks somewhere. We had a nice brunch. Fresh baked challahs, predlach soup, and pancakes drenched in sweet, sticky syrup. Papa talked nonsensical politics, which included the word Nazi. At the time, it meant nothing to me. I can remember going to the swimming pool in Luhakovis when I was 5 or 6. We stomped like a marching band towards the hotel's pool. Steps led up to the big pool from the children's paddling pool where we were supposed to stay. I had on my new red bathing suit. I felt like a prophetess.
Call me Sarah, Deborah, Esther, I squealed in glee. The water glistened like white pearls on the warm day, and the sky mirrored the water's clear blue color. I tried the first step, then the second one, which was already underwater, then the third one, by which time I was underwater and started to drown. A young lady pulled me out, and I got a smack on the bottom from my parents, but then they put me in for swimming lessons.
When I found Dagmar Lieblova's story, I was surprised to find that she was not very religious. She didn't go to synagogue, celebrate Jewish holidays, and she didn't keep kosher. I found this fascinating, being not very religious myself, and realized how the Nazis' lines of hatred didn't take into account how important religion was to somebody. Dagmar stood out to me because of this. She also kept her dignity and her identity throughout everything. This was her essence.
In her later childhood, Dagmar, dignified, gentle, brave, sensitive, determined.
This morning a bike was ridden. Across the pavement he pedaled. He moved his feet, pushing forward, past the Kraknos Mountains, down the tight and winding streets, past the St. Barbara's Church and through the forest. Traveling was forbidden for Jews. But Papa received permission to leave the city limits because he had patients in surrounding villages, so he could travel to them on his bike. A doctor he was, but a Jew is all they saw. How can it be that all they saw in Papa was a Jew? He was banned from cars, buses, boats, and everything in between other than his bicycle. Papa never complains, but I see the pain in his eyes. I wonder why the world, such a beautiful place, could act so ugly. I feel confused. I want to scream, but I bite my tongue. What good can a young girl do? And if I let it get to me, I let them win. So I prove myself victor as I hold my head high and keep my chin up despite my troubles. Because today I test my will with my small town of Kutna-Hora. I show them that they can ban my father from driving, tell me Jews are different, but I will not scream or cry. I'll be sensible, determined, and brave.
Dagmar, 2004, looking back on her childhood.
Kutna-Hora was a nice town, but I didn't realize this until later. I took the area for granted as a child, its winding streets and hills. Dad wouldn't get home until the evening. When they had a day off, my parents used to go to the cinema. There were 2 cinemas in Kutna-Hora, and my parents went to every film that was on, and to amateur theaters, concerts, or whatever other cultural events. My parents had a number of Jewish friends, but in general, they didn't care too much about their friends' origins. We mostly met with family members, particularly our relatives in Kislev. We saw each other nearly every week, and if not, Mom would at least speak to my aunt on the phone. We were a middle-class family. We had a car, a green one that reminded me of the deep woods in the summer, with 2 little headlights like the beady eyes of a possum. To me, that car was alive. The wheels were the longest little legs, and every bump we hit was a heartbeat. The car was pulsing, breathing, spitting out gas fumes. For Easter break, Mom and Papa decided that we would go to the Kraknos Mountains on vacation. The prime vacation spot for not only Czechoslovakia, but all of Poland and Germany as well. There would most likely be about 2 meters of snow on the mountain, and I wanted to learn how to ski. As we drove off for the mountains, I stared at the mountains in the distance, with wonder in my eyes. I could hear my parents chuckling about how big my pupils became when I saw the mountains. But I was wrapped up in my own thoughts of skiing through the lush, puffy snow, the wind whipping through my hair, and little beads of snow pecking at my face.
As you now know, the family wasn't allowed to drive that car for very long.
Dagmar and her family lived in Kutna-Hora until they were deported to Terezin in the summer of 1942. In 1943, they were taken away in closed cattle cars. They arrived at night in Auschwitz. Dagmar ended up in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp.
Dagmar inspires me because of her strength. I will always aspire to have her tenacity. After she lost everything, her home, her family, her entire life, she went back to her roots. She ended up going back to Kutna-Hora and began to rebuild her life. I will always aspire to have her strength, tenacity, and will to rebuild. And tenacity is what always kept her going.
Alice Klimova lived a few miles away in Prague and was just 1 year younger than Dagmar. Alice's legacy is to stay hopeful and to never forget the Holocaust. By sharing her story, we will remember it too. But as tides turned, there was hardship too.
Tensions are rising in Prague. Alice Klimova is just 11 years old.
It's Christmas time, one of my favorite times of the year. My father and I walked to our friend's house to see their tree. As we walk, the cold, breezy air makes me feel fresh and new. But still, there is something uneasy about the environment. Lately, there's been a sense of hatred and bitterness everywhere we go. We try to walk confidently down the block, but everywhere we turn, there's a swastika, simply our biggest enemy. No one has to explain it to me. I'm not exactly sure where it came from or what it means, but I know that we have to protect ourselves for as long as we can. The address numbers go down as we pass each Christian house. But we are Jewish. We are different. Finally, we get to their house, and I see something red and white hanging outside of their window. A flag, a small, worthless piece of cloth painted in the Nazis' colors. My father sees the horror on my face and tries to explain, but I can tell that he is shocked too.
It is to protect them from getting hurt. They're only doing it for their protection.
I nod, but no words come out. I can't even swallow. It was all just for their protection. Just so they could survive, just so they can live in peace. Just so they could eat a full family dinner. But what about respecting their dear friends? Just so they could keep on working, but we fight to get our jobs back. Just so they could survive and live in peace. But I, a little 11-year-old Jewish girl, can walk away from their house mad, sad, confused, and angry.
Heinrich Zinger, born 1914 in the Czech Republic. His essence is being able to chase what he believed in. In Zinger's case, he always found a way to practice his religion. His legacy is enduring hope.
As a young man in Veliky Berezny, Heinrich Zinger was religious, free, kashrut, Chechenian, submerged in education, food, traditional, one with his family, part of Shabbat and his religious community, happy, a bar mitzvah boy, in a cheder, studying in a garment factory, recruited to the Chechenian army.
Later, the Czech Armed and 4th Labor Battalion, who was unable to practice his religion, hopeful to be able to, stuck, restrained, assimilated, building trenches, sweating, hoping, longing for the opportunity to get away, with another army, sad, working.
A proud Jewish man named Heinrich Zinger. Religion is everything to me. As a child, Judaism was everywhere. It wasn't something I thought about. It was just something I did. I went to the synagogue in one of the 2 cheders in the middle of our town. Boys went at the age of 3. At the age of 4, they learned to read and the alphabet in Hebrew. They also studied Yiddish, learned to read and write, studied Jewish history, traditions, and religion. I went to synagogue every day and people kept kosher. When a cow was slaughtered, we only ate its front part. Its rear part was sold to the non-Jews in the community. We typically went fishing to put some fish on the table. Holidays were special in our house. We had different traditions for all of them. On Pesach, our neighbors came over to our house to make matzah for several families.
When we got together on a big table in the kitchen to sieve the flour, make the dough and roll it, we made a lot of matzah to last all throughout the 8 days of Pesach.
The family, including children over 5, fasted on Yom Kippur.
My mother and sister...
The Kapporos ritual was conducted before Yom Kippur.
My mother and sister took a white hen in their right hand.
Then men took a white rooster, said a prayer, waved it over their head, saying in Hebrew, "May you be my atonement." After the 24-hour fast, all food seemed particularly delicious, but yet, when I was in Veliky Berezny, I didn't grasp the importance of religion. In 1946, I was recruited to a Czech army, and religion for me changed. I began realizing that freedom of expression wasn't a right, it was a privilege. We were allowed to practice all the holidays from all 3 major religions, Judaism, Christian, and Catholic. I took advantage of our privileges and went to Shabbat and the Jewish holidays to the synagogue. My friends were mostly Czechs and Hungarians, but there were never any conflicts related to nationality. We were like a team, staying close together.
In 1939, Germany began World War II. Hungary was an ally of Germany, and mobilization of the Hungarian army began. In 1941, Germany attacked the USSR.
Because I was Jewish, I was mobilized to a forced labor battalion in the army, and I wasn't allowed to practice my religion at all. But I stayed strong, hopeful. When I was around in the forced labor battalion, our officers behaved with brutality. If we were to not follow our orders, we were to be shot. Before the Germans attacked our town, nationality and religion didn't matter. Now to the world, religion is everything.
Was open to all things and very sensitive.
Her essence is how she tries in every situation to be positive. Throughout her life, she shows positivity.
What drew you to her?
At first, as a young woman, I thought I'd connect to her, and I thought it was cool that she was from Bulgaria.
I thought she was like me, communicative and talkative throughout her town. She is also super brave and makes the best out of bad times.
The main reason I picked her is because when she was 14, the Holocaust was taking place. I am also 14. But before that, she lived her childhood in Sofia, Bulgaria.
I was born on March 15, 1925 in Sofia, Bulgaria. My family lived in a solid house that was inherited from my grandfather Kemal, who built it. It was old. We had only 3 floorboards. The rest were decayed and thrown away. We had no money and we couldn't repair the house. At the front door of the house, we had a mezuzah. When going in or out, my mother always kissed it. My mom was my inspiration. I followed my mom's footsteps by working hard for my family, doing chores, trying to make some money. My mom works in her family shop, but there are no goods, no money, and she went bankrupt. Many people in Sofia, Bulgaria were struggling at this time period, including my family who had very little money. Because we didn't have that much money, our toilet was outside. I didn't mind, except for in the winter I was very scared because I thought a wolf might come and attack me. For food, my mom would buy 1.5 liters of milk. She boiled it, put it in the middle of the table, and we all sipped from it. And that was our whole dinner some nights.
I learned that when we give to others is when we really get things in return. As I entered the room in my 4th grade class, I was filled with many bittersweet thoughts. I had been going to this little Jewish school since SK, and being in 4th grade, this year would be my last. While taking my seat, I was greeted by my new teacher. He was Romanian and didn't speak a word of Bulgarian. Sofia, Bulgaria is a big town full of beautiful locations, but it's not a place for someone who doesn't know the language. After school, I stopped by the market to pick up a meal for my family, a small meal of bread and cheese. While I was there, I saw my teacher struggling to communicate with the locals. As I walked home, the familiar road felt more bumpy. As I turned the corner onto my street filled with many Jews, I kissed the mezuzah. That night, I felt a strange feeling of guilt. The next day at school, I couldn't even look my teacher in the eye. It was decided. I offered to take him to all the ordinary places, the grocery store, the barber shop, and many more. One night, my mother invited him over to the Shabbat table, so he wouldn't be alone. I offered to teach him Bulgarian, and soon he became the teacher and I became the student. By the end of the year, he no longer needed me, and I learned that when you give to others is when you really get things in return.
Parents Zabados, ill-hungry just before the war. My father never wore traditional clothes, but he always wore a kippah or a hat. He had authority. Whatever he said, he never changed his mind. The community respected him. My father was never political. He fought through the First World War in the Royal Hungarian Army and was even held in Italian detention. My father worked as a tailor. We had a cow and about 50 or 60 geese. We didn't make money from them, though. We ate them. Every week, my mother would have the kosher butcher slaughter 1 or 2 of them. My parents spoke Yiddish with one another, but if there were Christians in our company, they would flip over to Hungarian because they would never want anyone to think they were saying something bad about them. My father whispered in my mother's ear,
"Oh my!"
They killed the Ger butcher. Supposedly, everyone knew who the killer was, but they never caught him. He was attacked on the road to Ilk by the anti-Semites and killed him because he brought meat to the Jews. I suddenly felt cold. I thought about Ilk and thought about Hungary and what it meant to my family to be here. I knew. I was afraid, angry, and sad. I knew what it meant, and I knew how important it was to us. I knew if I was smart, I could survive these anti-Semites.
Aldridge grew up in a small town in Tamashpol, Ukraine of less than 2,000. Most of the town was religious and kept Jewish customs. He had a traditional bar mitzvah at his home.
We were all poor in my town. The famine of 1933 had left us all starving. People were dying of starvation on the streets, and all I could do was watch and hope that it wouldn't be me or someone that I loved next. Every week on Sunday, my mother would come back to our little town of Tamashpol from the market in a nearby town with a jar of sour cream and a loaf of bread. We spread the sour cream on slices of bread in very thin layers just to make it last through the week. Those Sundays were a celebration just like Hanukkah to me. But my passion was painting. I loved painting portraits of philosophers such as Voltaire or Socrates, but at the time I had to make do with my drawing. The cost of canvas, brushes, and paint was much too expensive, and my mother had 2 hungry children to feed. She didn't want us to end up corpses on the street as well. We had to prioritize food over paints, survival over passion.
The more we connected to these people's lives.
I want to see the stories people have under them that you wouldn't know unless you go deep into who they are.
I chose to study Ruth Goetzova because I connected with her from my travels through her native countries of Germany and Czechoslovakia. I've traversed lands on which she walked, talked with her fellow nationals, tasted the foods of her lifetime, and experienced the remains of Terezin, the concentration camp in which she was detained. I was impressed with Prague's history and with Jewish quarters' beautiful synagogues. It was a humbling train ride to the former ghetto and concentration camp of Terezin. I walked the grounds and stood in the hidden synagogue. I watched a documentary film about the historic Red Cross visit to Terezin and how the Nazis convinced the world that the living conditions were comfortable for the Jewish community. But it was after reading Ruth Goetzova's story that my travel experiences were enriched.
The details in a person's life. Emma Nikonova, 6 years old in Russia, had a life filled with music.
For me, it was a connection through our common values. We both believe in tradition and passing on the memories. Rivka Bloomberg, 1939. Her message, don't take your parents for granted. My mom grew up in Klaipėda, Lithuania, a town full of pasture and water, where farmers excelled. My mom used to tell me tales about her family, but I didn't consider them important. I regret not giving my mom more respect. We weren't rich, but we made ends meet. We had a large family, and my mom was the glue that kept us together. My father grew up in Kaunas. He was very wealthy. He worked in commerce. He did not struggle growing up like my mom had. I love my dad greatly. He worked so hard for our family. I do not know the tale of how my parents met, but I know they fell in love, and it wasn't a prearranged marriage, proving that love can come in all different shapes and forms. If there is anything that I want to pass on, it is to not take your family for granted and cherish every moment that you have. For years, the past was almost a forbidden subject for me. It was far later that I started trying to restore whatever little could be found and reconstructed. Now I often look straight into my heart, trying to understand my life and my purpose, and my goal of passing on my mother's message.
Tradition, identity within religion.
The day has come. Today, my family and friends will see me as an adult in my religion. My friends see me with a newfound swagger, and my family a newfound sense of maturity. The Rabbi of Tallinn looks at me with a glow in his eye, and my congregation sees me as a bit more of a significant part of our semi-large not very conservative synagogue. But do I care? My bar mitzvah is merely a salute to the Jewish faith. I feel simple relief. All of that extra Torah learning I can surely do without. Our temple is wood finish, wood and brick, and rats. We will have a small celebration, some food like soup and drinks like grape juice, but nothing more. Just the way I like it. Not too much and very, very relaxed. My family isn't a religious bunch. You see, we observe some holidays and eat kosher foods, but nothing more. I'm a member of youth Zionist movements and the Betar organization, which is one Jewish-focused activity I enjoy. Betar members are taught that they shouldn't pay more attention to praying, which wouldn't help in the foundation of the state, but to craftsmanship, tilling, and military professions, which Israel needs these people for it to be formed and protected.
Meet the Judevit Blumenberg in Kangizia, Serbia. It's 1927.
My bar mitzvah was yesterday. I woke up and felt disconnected from reality. As I began to prepare myself, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. I stepped outside and began to walk, but even the fresh air outside did not help me catch my breath. Yet after reading the Torah, I felt the same as I always did. Our Neolog community sees it as more important for the child to read a portion that speaks to the individual than it is for the portion to fall on the boy's birthday. The Neolog community is more reformed than the Orthodox community. After the service, we had a party in my aunt's backyard. It was extravagant, as parties in the Neolog community usually are. We had food that consisted of fresh chickens, fruits, and squeezed peach juice. And we danced, the men picking up the women and swinging them around. We had horns and string instruments, and the neighbors came to set up the dance floor, food, and decorations.
Tradition, identity from religion. Meet Bernat Sabro, born in Târgu Mureș, Romania, studying in Secolaiu.
I arrived at rabbinical school when I was around 14. Father sent me with my younger cousin Jossie. It was quite costly to send us there, but Father cared more about who we would be religiously. Religion has always been a big part of my life, and it is what makes me strong. The rabbi there was named
Dr. Rosner, one of the most well-respected rabbis in the entire country. He got his degree from the Hebrew University in Vienna, which was also a very good school.
A wealthy Jew from America came and built a beautiful boarding house where we moved. There were 2 canteens there for the rich and the poor. The rich got goose and meat, whereas we, the middle class and poor, ate small portions of bread and other lower quality food.
Everything there was kosher, of course.
We studied Talmud, and the rabbi had big, thick books of commentary on what we should learn. We learned together in something like a college campus, although the different classes were very segregated. I tried not to worry too much about that, and just become as wise according to Jewish law as I could. Religion is what drives me and moves me forward, and I must not let that important part of who I am slip away from me.
Eva George, late 1930s, tradition, arts.
Romania, where I got a good chunk of my ethnic roots. She danced as a child, like me.
Artist, brisker, dancer, twirlist, picking the ripe red currant straight off the briar. The rich Mureș Mountains flowing into overcast skies. The sweet smell of gooseberries comforting in her hand. Afraid of the times and expected to be stronger. Wondering how long the mountains will last.
Dance inspires me, controls me, is me. It understands me, and I it. I cannot imagine my life being dedicated to anything else. Ever since I was a little girl, the whole town of Târgu Mureș knew I was destined to be a dancer. My early childhood floods with memories of dance. Spinning and twirling in the shadows of the grapefruit trees, leaping over the gooseberry bushes, and swaying with the breeze of the river. I remember running into town on many warm, dry summer days. Turning, dodging, navigating my way through the crowd, careful not to run into anyone. My parents noticed my natural talent for the art and quickly enrolled me in as many classes offered. A dusty yet refreshing dance studio. Giant mirrors and wooden paneling filled the space, and this instantly became my new home. As I stepped inside, the wooden floorboards began to creak. They were just as nervous as I was. My teacher was Skulai Pulaski. We started with traditional ballet, point works, turning in on the legs and high extensions, a truly graceful dance. As we began to shape into little ballerinas, we started more traditional or modern ballet. I appeared many times on the Transylvania Cinema stage, and it was really great. It's what you choose to do with your faith that matters. I will always be a dancer.
Tradition, importance of learning. Meet Rosa Ansel from Sofia, Bulgaria.
When I was a child, I got scarlet fever, though my mother didn't believe I was sick. It took her 3 whole days to finally call her doctor. He diagnosed me, and I was sent to the regional hospital in the isolation ward, so I wouldn't infect my brother and sisters. On the whole trip there, she would not stop yelling at me for getting sick. I understood she didn't want to pay for the treatment, but she took it way over the top. And even once we got there, she insisted on coming with me to the isolation ward. Her stubbornness had 2 sides. One, to be there for me, and the other, to test me on my lessons. She'd make us read our lessons aloud, then she would memorize what we said to test us later to see if we remembered. The irony in the situation was she was illiterate. When she was testing my brother, he would have an odd tendency to walk around her. One time, he noticed she was holding the book upside down. I think her lessons helped speed up my recovery. After a while, all I wanted was to get out of there as soon as possible.
Frankfurt, Germany. Tradition, the arts, as a child.
I may not be an observant Jew, but today is Friday, and Friday means Shabbat, and the whole family will be together. My friends and I attend a school named Samson Raphael Hirsch School. It is a Jewish school, but I don't speak Hebrew. Each day I return home at 1 p.m. I play hopscotch and ride my bike with my friends. My parents got me a pretty bike, and all my friends are jealous. We make art together. I'm really good at making jewelry. Several times a week after school, I attend a Zionist youth movement named Blue White. But it is never boring. We go hiking, we sing, and we talk about immigrating to Palestine. Tonight, my mom will light the Shabbat candles. She has influence over the spirit of the home. Me and my brothers will be blessed by our dad, a gentle reminder of his love.
Later in her life. I feel lost. I don't belong in any religious world. I've always been and will always be proud to wear a diamond-studded Star of David around my neck. It belonged to my grandmother. She was a fantastic painter, and hanging above my bed lies a beautiful portrait of my hometown, Frankfurt. Frankfurt is my cocoon. I'm a Jew, but what kind? My mother and father are different levels of devout, and the way I think of my Orthodox community is complex. There are too many rules for me to be able to be myself and feel free. I want to have a voice that is my own. When I find who I am, I will hold on to that girl for dear life and never let go. A poem. I remember the music of certainty. Some may argue, but knowing exactly who you are has a tune. The violin playing the notes that have been stuck in your head for weeks. It's not so much the music represents certainty. Music just knows it. It's almost as if they are friends. Feeling Lost has its own music, but it's not a song people want to listen to. Right now, my life isn't a song worth listening to. But I remember what it was like to know exactly who you are. I remember the song of that time and all the joy it brought. I remember the music of certainty.
Tradition, the arts. I'm in Nakonova had childhood of culture and the arts.
Emma, stop that at once. You made her cry. Now step back. That's all I heard in classes today. I was not a great pupil at school. Such horrific memories. The school I attend is a new 2-story building, school number 22, named after Stalin. It is customary to give new schools the leaders' names. Today is March 12, 1938, and I feel I belong with people who are more free-spirited like me. I love Vitas Beck for its tranquil rhythm of provincial life. I hear something coming from our flag. It's in the heart of Vetusbeck and was provided by the state. But they are separate flats, not communal apartments. I slowly creak open the heavy wooden door and peer into our living room to piano music.
We lived in Mogilev and Villa Kiluki before other places. The wooden house with brick foundation was smack in the middle of town was different than any other. Granddad was a professional painter and always had beautiful ornaments and decorations in the house. There was an orchard around the corner and a vegetable garden with the prettiest flowers in the entire world. It was magical. My parents were not members of the party, but they were active in public life as everyone was. Father was a military vet. The families of the military would only socialize with each other, not with civilians. It was a good form to visit the House of the Red Army. Mama would combine her work as a bacteriologist with family duties. She even was a participant in the Ladies' Council. She acted in plays too. Mother says,
"Something about music tunes out everything else. It teaches me more than I ever learned in school. Play, listen, learn."
I did study music. A Polish lady named Maria Antonova came and gave me lessons, but I was disobedient and hid in the garden. I did not want to study. No matter how hard I tried, I didn't have the same connection to it as her. I had a talent, but not a bond with it. The piano arrived when my parents got married. It was from the famous firm Becker. This piano was owned by the pre-revolutionary governor. As I grew up, music continued to play, and I took it in with inspiration as it filled my hopes for tomorrow.
Literature and the arts. Now meet Leontina Ardita at 10 in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Despite absolute poverty, my parents regularly buy me books. In our house, we read a lot. Newspapers, books. But all I want to be is an actress. And today was my start. My feet were racing down the cracked streets, and I was zoning in on one thing, which was the tall tan brick building with the Jewish star on the outside. Summer school. My father made a major gesture and sold his wedding ring in order to buy me this violin. It was a big deal because he was just a typist in town and we could barely afford anything else. I was only 4 then, but he knew I had an ear for music. I knew I needed to focus as hard as I could because if I put my mind to it, no one could stop me. My goal was set.
Breaking from tradition, Yako lived in Rus, Bulgaria, and had no ideas for the future.
I don't believe in God. I look around the world and I see poverty. People are suffering. I see the just being persecuted and the unjust being successful. If there was a God, why is there no evidence he exists? Our rabbi in Rus is a shochet. He slaughters animals for a living, a butcher of hens. Jews are somewhat tolerated in the community where I live, but are not fully accepted. It is time for a change. It's time to start moving towards a new world, a communist world. Religion is nothing but the opiate of the masses. It's what rich people give to poor people to focus on their heavenly rewards as opposed to their poverty. I want a new world in which we're all equal. People won't be judged on their religion, no whether they're rich or poor. All will be equal.
Meet Leon Yako Anzel. Remember Yambo, Bulgaria. He named his daughter Yafa after his mother.
We used to go hiking. There are nice places around Yambo which I visited with my family. One of them was Bakajik, from which you could see as far as the White Sea. When I hiked, I saw time itself. I loved geology, topography, and nature. Once on a long stroll through Yambo, we went through the park, and I saw a bird, which to this day I know I never saw another one like it. We stopped at my parents' favorite coffee shop. My parents brought the coffee to the table outside. However, I was only 9 years old, so they brought me a cheese Danish instead. I went inside to use the bathroom. And when I came back, they were gone. Are they back home? Were they taken away? Horrible thoughts swimming in my head. 45 minutes. The coffee shop employees had no idea where they were, but they brought me water and another Danish. 90 minutes. I broke down and cried. I tried to find my way home. No avail. I returned back to the shop, only to find myself in the warm embrace of my mother and my father. Tears danced upon our faces, and we went back home, not saying anything at all, but only glad to have each other.
Tradition, identity comes from place. Adela, intelligent, small, clumsy, shy. Sister of Esther, Reina, Safka, Rachel, and Mazel. Lover of math, family, school. Who feels elated at a right answer, awkward when running, and happy at home. Who needs someone to love, someone taking care of her, and language. Who gives help to others, love, advice. Who fears a mean teacher, bugs, and athletics. Who would like to see her father again, her mother every day, and her sisters. Resident of Sofia, Bulgaria, Parcheny Nishavsky Street, Levin.
My father died at the age of 43 in 1931. My youngest sister Mazel was only 1 year and 6 days old. He was a shoemaker. He made shoes out of leather. They were called a pinsky and were worn by the villagers. There were 2 dormitories in the orphanage, and the beds were made of iron. The toilets were inside. There were washing machines and washing women. There was also a small room. We called it the isolator. If someone got sick, they were put in that room so they wouldn't infect the others. We played mostly a game called People's Ball at the orphanage. The playing field is divided into 2 by a line, but no net is placed in the middle. The player who has the ball throws it hard on the player on his team who is outside the playing field and aims to hit a player from the other team in the process. I could see my team waving at me. I jumped up to catch the ball, but instead pushed it to the other team. I could feel the embarrassment pulling at my stomach. As my team shook their heads, they shoved me to the front of the playing field. I saw it. They wanted to use me as a shield. They considered me expendable. That was my childhood.
Adolf Landsman, Nizhny Novgorod, Russia. It seems our family is cursed with death. My grandpa died when I was 10 years old. He spoke only Yiddish and was very religious, unlike us. He was about my height, short and stout, and had a temper. My uncle died shortly after. Little did I know that soon our family, along with our entire community, country, and religion, faced huge losses that made the survivors the lucky ones survive the most terrible time in history. I was told that I was lucky to live in our big city. One of the big cities in Russia, and one of the only ones that accepted Jews during Tsarist times. Being a Jew in this time was hard for our family. We faced job discrimination. Then came the pogroms and riots against Jews.
I have traversed the lands on which she walked and tasted the foods of her lifetime. But it was after reading Ruth Goetzel's story that my travel experiences were enriched. Prague, Czechoslovakia in the 1920s and 30s. I was Ruth's grandfather. Rigid, religious, traditional. I wore a precise Swiss watch that was synced up to the second. I lived my life to that same precision. I was good, honest, but in some cases, wrong. Ruth had ventured outside by herself, just 10 years old. Her girlfriend took her to the top of the Rotunda of St. George. It was on top of the Rip Mountain. The air was refreshing and the beautiful view from atop the Rip Mountain was spectacular. But then it happened. Ruth was enraptured by the sights and sounds. She tripped and fell down a gully. Her teenage girlfriend carried her to the doctor. The doctor then called me on his candlestick phone. My scream echoed as I reprimanded him. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You saw it and you allowed some girl to carry her? Couldn't you have called me so that I could have taken her? She's got her leg in a cast. We were traditional back then, and I believed in chivalry. I was upset with the doctor for not informing me sooner. I didn't understand that in times of need, it made no difference who helps, man or woman.
Traditions cement into legacies for the generations to come.
Rachel Aberbu from Pskov, Russia reminds me of my great-grandmother Mildred. Strong women, Russian, and around the same age. Like my great-grandmother, Rachel has taught me not to follow the crowd if I don't think it's the right way to go. I should be strong, do what I believe and not what others believe.
Here's Rachel.
When I believe something, I live my life surrounding that belief. And I question Judaism, which means I think of an infinite amount of questions. Growing up, my parents had staunch beliefs. Mom and Dad, without fail, prayed before meals. They would wash their hands in a bowl and rinse them with water from a jug 3 times on each side. They pronounced the blessing for the meal. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. I did not mind the prayers, but I had trouble keeping kosher. One sleepless Thursday night, I put a piece of bread in the oven. I could smell the burnt crust of the previous victims. 3 kitchen cabinets containing silverware. One used only on high holidays, one used for meat meals, and one used for dairy meals. I pull out a knife.
In walked my mother, a kosher chicken in tow.
I slid the knife through the butter, cutting off a sliver.
She screamed and snatched it away from me and thrust it in a slot in the wooden floor. In such cases, you have to keep the knife in the ground for some time. In this way, the object regains its properties of being kosher, of being pure.
I've used a meat knife on a dairy product. Why is kashrut so important to my mother anyways? Back when my mom was a kid in the late 1800s, it was unimaginable to break tradition. When I grew up, the new generation was just starting to break traditions. If I believe one thing, it's that things don't always have to be one way.
Taking part in politics and believing in the future. Here's Yako Yako from Rus, Bulgaria, again, except this time as a boy.
I believe in politics. I am part of the Maccabi Youth Organization. We believe our power is not in our deeds, but in our ideas. I have always loved Judaism and gone to Jewish schools. My teacher from Palestine would teach from the Tanakh. Geometry and arithmetic are not for me. It's all about the dream.
Henry Crouch returned back to his homeland, Gora Kalwaria, and lives there still today. That is his legacy, to restore the childhood he had for the generations to come. Let's go back to a time, a simpler time, the time of my bar mitzvah. I was not one of the rich kids in Poland. My mother was a seamstress in our poor Jewish village, and my father traded. I went to a Polish elementary school and attended the cheder in the afternoons, where I learned to read and write in Hebrew. Preparing for my bar mitzvah, hours and hours of countless chants and prayers, little sleep and butterflies in my stomach. I wasn't ready until the night before. That night I realized what an honor it was to read the ancient texts, the stories of our past. I stood at the Torah with a spark in my eye. When I started reading, I felt like I was talking to all of my descendants that came before me. Avram, Jacob, Isaac, and David. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I believe that no one could have better chanted the words like I, and out of the synagogue I skipped, ready to face the world as a man. My parents gave me 5 zlots, Polish dollars, and that was all. I had never realized that Judaism could be so empowering. My friends and I joined the SCIF. SCIF stands for Sozialkinder Verband, or the Socialist Youth Union, a children's group that was fighting for Jews. Anti-Semitism had started rising, and we felt the need to fight back. I know Jewish religion, and I'm proud I do.
I have the ability to forgive, which is more than some people can say. I am lucky enough to be able to forgive the people who have hurt me so badly. However, I am not able to forgive certain moments with my friends and neighbors of Gora Kalwaria. It was a day I will never forget. It was a normal day, the same as any other. Our community was close, caring. I had done my normal morning routine and decided to go out to get some air when I was escorted over to the office by my neighbors and friends. Once at the office, they proceeded to ask me multiple questions, and then,
Do you think you are a good Pole?
outraged that they even have to ask me this, I stormed out of the office without even a goodbye. These people were my friends, my neighbors. I trusted them. Gora Kalwaria had always been my home, and I feel a connection. Betrayed by the people who I once called family. Betrayed by the land I once called home. I was made to question my loyalty to Poland. I had served in the army. I would never do anything to harm Poland. I do not hold a grudge. Some may say that it's a bad thing, but it's truly a gift. Being able to forgive those who crossed you takes pure strength and is not a sign of weakness. I have returned to my homeland, and yes, I am a good Pole.
Alfred Borowitz also lived in Poland. It was a few years earlier, but he also leaves us with a legacy of strength.
I grew up in a town called Wiltska in the early 1900s. In school, I wasn't required to go to religion class because I was a Jew, and they didn't have enough Jews to make a Jewish religion class. This was fine by me. Any excuse to not attend a part of school was all right. When class began, I would simply walk out. This is how things were. Easy. One day a priest came up to me. This priest always held a grudge against me. He told me that although I did not attend religion class, I would have to take the test. We both knew that if I did not pass this test, I would not get to go to high school. It took determination and effort on my part, but I learned.
Legacy Hope.
Salier Gouv, Kiev, Ukraine. Once I got into the living room during a prayer and tied together the tassels of the Tali team. The men didn't notice anything. Only when it was time to go home did the men notice that they were tied together. My grandfather was terribly angry with me for the first and last time in my life. My paternal grandparents were religious, but my father left his home at a young age and was a convinced atheist, while my mother just never felt a connection to the religion. My grandfather felt that connection in a strong way. He always tried to have a minion, and when there weren't enough people to start it, he would ask my father to join in. On that particular day, I was bored. Grandfather and the men were praying in the room. I remember sitting in the doorway watching them in their prayers, each one finding their own rhythm in the prayers and swaying, some closing their eyes and bowing their heads, others looking up to the sky towards God above. That's when I decided to stand up and test something on one of the men standing towards the back of the room. I walked up to him and tapped him on the shoulder. Nothing happened. That's when I decided to tie together the tassels of the Tali team. It was the first and the last time in my life my grandfather ever got mad at me.
Legacy, survival.
Victor Feldman. The famine in Ukraine started in 1933. People are swollen and starving in the streets. When I walk the streets of Odessa, I feel the threat of people coming up to me and asking for something to eat. Fish and sunflower oil are far too expensive. We wait, we survive.
Stefan Guth was a curious, intellectual kid. He liked to read, he liked to learn. He was born in a medium-sized town in Romania. His family fit into society, and then all of a sudden, they were no longer accepted.
Legacy, pride, freedom.
I was born in Brasov in 1931. The first house we lived in was rather big. It had a huge garden, more of a hayfield with wildflowers actually, because nobody ever planted anything in it. I used to play there, run, catch butterflies. It was heaven on earth. That is my favorite memory. It represented a time before the Holocaust. Everything was so pure and pleasing. During the Holocaust, that memory changed. It turned into a sad memory, a tease of what life used to be. Our wings were cut off, our petals plucked off one by one. No longer was life as free as it was. That culture died during the Holocaust, but the memory lives on.
Legacy, resilience.
Remember Rebecca Bloomberg? Well, trials didn't end for Rebecca. She valued family, community, and equality. In June of 1941, the Soviet Union declared their first major deportation of enemies of the states. This was the deportation of thousands of everyday people thought to be capable of going against the revolution.
She writes, "My family was deported. Finally we reached peace when we were taken to a settlement on a beef field. We were accommodated in wooden barracks with 2- and 3-tier plank beds. Most of us spoke German and Lithuanian and hardly any Russian. The women were sent to work in the pea fields almost immediately, though 2 or 3 stayed behind to look after the children. When I got off the train, I was only 4 years old. I'm now 77. To this day, 73 years later, I don't know how I did it. I stepped on a train knowing nothing except that my life was being taken away. 2.5 days of standing, bad smell, hunger, thirst, cries, and terror later, I was presented with a new life, void of everything. How did I accept that? When my family returned to Lithuania, we were petrified to find that everything we had known from before the war had been completely obliterated. While we were lucky enough to have a few relatives to stay with, nothing else was the same. No friends, no home, no life. It was tough, but like everything else we went through, we survived and overcame it.
Legacy, family tricks and secrets. The sentimentality passed from father to son. Memories.
Papa, give me a crown to play the gambling machine.
Today, a bright morning with only 3 wispy clouds over my head, Papa and I round Jindřiška Street, admiring the beauty of Prague, my city, truly a paradise. I could have never been a country kind of boy, especially after experiencing a city with such color and vibrancy. As we round the bend, a smile spreads across my face. I can already smell the smoke of the cigars pass through my family, starting with my grandfather. Just like my papa, the gambling machine in Prague's best coffee house is a sensitive being. Be kind to it, and silver or even bronze crowns will tumble down into a metal bowl where eager hands wait to seize their loot. This is where I spend my time when Papa comes to play cards with his richly dressed, poorly mannered acquaintances. I have grown accustomed to the dirty machine covered in the odor of Virginias, those long, thin cigarettes that seem to follow my father around. Shh, Papa has taught me how to cheat with just one little straw. He still, of course, is a very good, honest man. You bend the straw slightly, hit the exact spot, and about 3 coins will drop out. However, you can't keep this up all day, for my father ends up angry after he changes his mind about our little swindle. I'll end up receiving a few brisk blows to the ear or a quick yanking of my collar.
Stories of Home, Angel Moreau Mary.
The life I had at my grandparents' house was the best part of my whole life. I remember all my brothers and sisters sitting around the dining room table while Father would tell us the story.
After the tragic fire in Salonika in 1917, I bought this land from a Turk. After I met your grandmother, your mother, I built this house that we got a family.
Salonika, Greece has always had a large Jewish population. I would walk up and down the 19 wooden steps of our house because I loved the creaking sound they made. At the top of the stairs, there were 2 beautiful entrances. One led to the living room, the other to the kitchen. Each morning while I sat and ate my breakfast, I would look out to see the beautiful trees. There were 4 bedrooms.
I built this room for your grandmother. Isn't it amazing?
Yes, it is the best room in the house by far. Good night trees. My room was in the back, which meant I got cold during the winter.
Just stay under the covers and you keep warm. At least we have electricity.
We had chandeliers that provided lots of light. My siblings and I loved those chandeliers so much that we would sit underneath them, tell crazy stories about little people living in them. There was a house that Father used to rent out.
The house had many windows and was rented out mainly to Jews.
Father would go every Noches de Shabbat to wish the renters a happy Sabbath. There was a storehouse with the Magen David on it with the year the house was built, 1923. We learned our address at a very young age. 33 Olympus Street. That address has stayed with me forever.
Renee Moho also lived in Greece. Her legacy is a story of a childhood marked by tradition and community, and a promise to her roots. Through the hard times, I carried a piece of Judaism with me. A puzzle piece fit snugly in my heart. I promised I would go to synagogue, I promised I would be an upstander, and I promised to never let my Judaism go. And still to this day, the puzzle piece is glued right in my heart where it never left. That is what helped me going, and that is what helped me stay alive. And ever since I made those promises, I fulfilled them.
Salonika, or Thessaloniki, Greece was special. It has been so many years since I reflected. The taste and smells are but crumbs of reminiscence. The essence of a community so strong and vibrant. It always seems to find its way in my heart, never neglecting to remind me of the bright days before. Salonika was our Jerusalem, the holy homeland of Sephardic Jews, and Pesach was a symbol of our freedom, community, strength, and culture. Pesach represented the Jewish victory. My family and I always hosted the second night of Pesach. We assembled around the white tablecloth, gently placed flower bouquets and damp grapes. Mama's touch was always lively. Her cheerful disposition lit up our home, especially compared to Papa's serious tone. I loved them both. Papa used to lead the Seder, reading the Haggadah in Spanish. We sang, "He who says this bread of slavery that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt." I skipped with Papa through the bustling streets of Salonika to buy matzah from the bakery. Papa was a serious man, wise but serious, and Pesach was one of the only times he laughed and sang. I loved seeing him that way. It was something fresh and different. It showed how Salonika's spirit could influence anyone. During Pesach, Mama, my 2 sisters, Matilda and Ida, would line up to make haroset.
Nowadays, we buy it from a shop, but when I eat it at home, I can always see something is missing. Maybe it is the spirit of Salonika. It is amazing what spirits that can add to a dish.
We lined up with long floral dresses and delicately stained white aprons, passing items, laughing, and singing. Always a joy. When we finished dinner,
everyone wanted sweets, so we made bermulas, which is like deep fried donuts. My sisters and I used to cheerfully shriek as the balls may splash into the hot oil. What an amusement.
Mama was an amazing woman. She was intelligent, cheerful, hardworking, and always wanted the best for her girls. She was as vibrant as Salonika. You couldn't miss her walking to the butcher shop with a sweet smile and optimistic eyes. When I think back to Salonika, I think of the traditions filled with life and beauty. The foods, dress, customs, singing, and family gathering. The town was my family. Pesach in Salonika was so special because I was with my family. Not just my beloved Papa, Mama, Ida, and Matilde, but my bigger family, Salonika. The family that ran
through Mizrahi Street towards the Matzah Bakery. The family that smiled as they made habrosset. The family that sounded of clanking pans.
Maybe that family seems lost in the cycling darkness. But as I placed bermudas into the hot oil at 80 years old, that family, that essence, seems to have found its way in my heart. And I truly hope the rest of the world can taste the splashing hot oil of that family too.
Legacy of Leon Yako Anzel, hope through hardship, his childhood in Yambo and Sofia, Bulgaria.
One event changed my life forever. It shook me to my very core and made me realize what is truly important in this world. My father died in 1932 when I was 11. After that, our family decided to move to Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. I had to leave everything I had ever known. My mother took the loss of my father really hard. She became a husk of her former self. It was up to me and my brothers to keep us alive. During the holidays, I used to work as an apprentice at a mirror shop. I would take the mirrors through the streets of Sofia for seven legs per day. I would leave them in Trapezetsa Square and walk back. For comparison, a loaf of bread with 5 legs and a kilo of cheese with 7 legs. Memories of my father. One day, on returning home, my father asked my mother to give him walnuts, garlic, and salt. He invited me to join him, but I refused, of course. But he was eating with such appetite that I changed my mind and wanted to take a bite. I liked it so much that my appetite whetted, and it seems to me that I wasn't such a poor eater anymore. My father guided me to try new things, and when he died, I lost my compass and was stranded in a sea of uncertainty. But I kept my hope.
I needed my hope. I needed that hope. It was a fine Friday evening. The sun was just starting to cast a beautiful palette of colors onto the sky. This view of the sunset has always been a symbol of my life, of everyone in Yambo, all living under the same sun, everyone being accepted into society. I could smell the familiar smell of Shabbat food coming from the kitchen, the homemade challah baking in the oven, the spices cooking on the chicken. At dinner, I heard a sound, a person's voice. Wondering what it could be, I go to the window to see what it was. Oh, it's 2 of my friends, Krasimir and Nikola, who are both some of my best friends, although they go to the Christian Bulgarian school. I can't make out what they're saying.
Hey, what are you guys saying?
Then something horrible happens that will change my life forever.
Krasimir bends down carefully and picks up a rock off the sidewalk. He then chucks it as hard as he can at my window. A painful shrieking sound fills my ears as my window is shattered to pieces.
I stare down at my feet and look at the broken pieces of glass. But it is not just the window that is broken. It is the heart of Yambo. The sun has sunken beneath the mountains now, leaving the sky pitch black.
Today, Lily Tauber and her husband Max Tauber sit in their communal apartment in Vienna's 19th district. The smell of coffee fills the apartment and a cake is sitting on the table. Lily Tauber is a small, lively woman with short, wavy hair. She laughs a lot, which makes it hard to imagine what kind of hardships she had to go through in her life. She's immediately likable, and she remembers many names and events. And relate stories as if they had only happened yesterday. She leaves a legacy of beautiful Viennese childhood, even though she left on her homeland through the Kindertransport.
Jewish traditions were always very important to my mother. Every Friday, I would come home from school to the smell of chicken cooking and goose fat. We usually ate cold foods for dinner, but never for Shabbat. This was not proper. The table was always plain, but it looked beautiful to me regardless. Growing up in Vienna, I went to primary school as well as religious school. Leaving my homeland was a terrible thing to have to do at such a young age. To this day, I still can't understand what would possess someone to make people do that. A few days after receiving my permit for the Kindertransport to England in the mail, another one came. My father took it to the transport office and asked if it could be given to my friend Susie. They declined, and she was killed in the Wadowa ghetto. I will never forget boarding the train, the thick, acrid smoke in the air, the howling of trains as well as families saying goodbye to their children, the blended tears of my mother and I as she hugged me goodbye, my father trying to smile as the train put out of the station. Although it often rained in Austria, I remembered it as sunny, and that's why I went back. All the ties of my childhood held fast, and even after the ordeal I went through, I felt an immeasurable connection. They say all roads lead to home. Of all the things in my life, it's the relationships that I've had and have that keep me up at night. My mother, my father, my siblings, Susie, my husband, have all changed me in immeasurable ways. They are the ones that make me want to tell my story. Even though the ordeals I've been through in my life have been very sad, I tell my story with happiness for a reason I cannot even fully comprehend myself. But I suppose it is a great thing to tell and be told of for generations to come, for me, my friends, and my family.
Abraham J. Heschel, Vermont. The little Jewish communities of Eastern Europe were like sacred texts, opened before the eyes of God. Has there ever been more light in the souls of the Jews in the last 1,000 years? Present generations still hold the keys to the treasure. If we do not uncover the wealth, the keys will go down to the grave. And the storehouse of the generations will remain locked forever. A day will come when the history of Eastern European period will be revealed. The echoes remain.
The echoes remain. Listen.
I think you all agree that that was absolutely amazing. There are a lot of people and organizations that I want to thank for this. Most of all, I want to thank Centropa. That was the organization that we drew all of this material from, and Lauren Granick in New York is the head of Centropa in the United States. And thankfully, she's sending me to Vienna this summer and Sarajevo, and I'll get a chance to talk to educators from around the world, Jewish educators, about what we did here. I also want to thank all the administrators, Ms. Horwitz, Ms. Zimbler, Ms. Mayagawa. Did I leave anybody out?
The teacher.
Huh?
Advisors.
Well, no, of the administrators. I'm so touched by what I saw here. I want to thank the 8th grade team for helping out on this. And most of all, I want to thank the 8th grade students. You guys, every one of you is going to take home a lesson from this experience and journey that we've been on. For me, the lesson is that I will never teach the Holocaust again without focusing not just on how people died, but also on how they lived. That's really honoring their memory and legacy. I'm going to turn it over to Gabby. Gabby?
She's here. Right here. Yay, Gabby. On behalf of the 8th grade students and teachers, we would like to thank Dr. Ellison for his extraordinary work in organizing this project and coming up with the brilliant idea of honoring the Jewish way of life in Central and Eastern Europe before the Holocaust. Your endless support and encouragement have allowed us to create a beautiful performance. Thank you.
We would also like to thank Nicole and Kelsey from Writers Theater for their incredible hard work and dedication in creating and performing our monologues. The difficult process entailed helping us research, write, edit for over 20 hours, act, and block our monologues. Your creativity, flexibility, patience with students, and love for theater all contributed to the great success of our performance. You've inspired us to bring our characters to life and honor their essence and legacy. Without you, none of this would have been possible. Thank you.
Are we done?